I'm going to be making a lot of tiny repeated angle cuts in order to make this inlay banding, and I've decided the safest way to do that is on the bandsaw. But I also need a zero clearance fence, and I need an adjustable angle. Sometimes I'll be cutting this at 90 degrees, sometimes 45 degrees, sometimes, I don't know, 20, 15 degrees, depending on the type of design I want to produce in my inlay. So I'm going to make an adjustable angle bandsaw sled. The way the basic plan works is I have a piece of plywood that's the size of my table on the bandsaw. This edge will line up with the right side edge. The blade will be cutting through about here. I have a piece of stock that this happens to be a plastic that will slide easy into the miter slot on my bandsaw, which lies about there. Again, the blade will come through here only down to the place where my fence lies. This line represents about the 45-degree angle that I want my fence to lie on, so my cut will end right about there on a 45-degree angle. So to figure out the actual layout for my plan, I've drawn the 45-degree angle so that I make sure that when the fence is sitting on here, I'll be able to reference this side of the board to line it up using a bevel gauge, sliding bevel gauge, which I prefer to use instead of precise measurements. Okay, so as I rotate the board, I'm going to make sure that the pinpoint that I've got in here, which will be a fixed screw coming up, that has to stay in this slot at all times. So I just need to make sure that as I rotate and bring this to square, it'll fit at some place in that slot. And at the same time, this vertical line that I've drawn on my board has to be somewhere in this slot. So both points at the same time as I move the fence through its angle. I decided it'd be really nice to have a sliding stop on it, and since I don't have any metal T-track, I don't have a T-slot cutter, I'm going to be doing this a simplified way. I'll just put a slot onto my fence towards the top. Now most people would probably be using a regular router to do this. You could use whatever you wanted to be able to groove that. You could even use a table saw, dado blades, whatever. But I'm going to choose to use my plow plane because I like working unplugged. In order for this T-nut to fit inside of the slot, I need to put this top strip in at about, looks like 3/8 of an inch, or 1 3/4 inches will do nicely for this bottom strip. So 3/8 of an inch and 1 3/4. I'm going to rip these pieces to width on the table saw, set the blade height to just above the wood piece so my teeth are coming through. My rabbit will clear through barely. I'll be gluing these together, top side to groove to the top side. Afterwards I can cut these lengths off. I just want to make sure that I match up the edges on the top and the bottom, and I'll glue it down this way. This will act as a nice caul for itself to get everything good and flat. That's my homemade T-track. So I'm going to set this up on my panel router, The height of the bit is going to clear out the pass for the slot from that end as far as there, and then I'll move the board over to do the second pass. I've got stops on the bottom to ensure that the board is at the same height. I'll have to slide those over. Ring protection. Now that I have the slot here, in order to keep this part, this is the knob I'm planning on using to secure my fence, and in order to allow it to pass freely on the bottom side without having my table tilted, I need to put about a 1/2 inch wide, which is the width of this, 1/2 inch wide groove along the bottom, about 1/8 inch in, maybe a little bit more, just to make sure it's not rubbing against the table. I'll do that the same way. I don't need the backer board because I'm not going all the way through this time, so I'll set my depth to 1/8 inch. Looks like I need a little bit more width for this to slide smoothly in there, so I'll just raise the panel router just a fraction. Okay, it's not the most beautiful slot on the back side, but it still is going to allow me to allow this to pass through just fine, and that's what I'm after without falling out or going through the bottom. So I'm ready to put the plate in here. I'll be using this kind of a butterfly pattern template that you can get from Panel Router. You can make any kind of design you want. Like I said, you can put a square plate, whatever you want in there. I have my board centered with the saw kerf that I'll be putting in centered on the tabletop. I've lined it up about 1 inch back from the edge so that when I tip it up, it'll be in line where I want it to from the back edge and not too far in. So it's set up to be able to tip this up to 90 degrees. I'm using the 1/2 inch bit so that I get as big of a mortise as I possibly can. I'll do the mortise first. So it makes kind of a little rounded butterfly shape. That's the biggest it will make with this particular follower. I could go to this tip and get it just a little bit bigger, but this will suffice. I'll be making the plug out of this piece of mahogany that I have. I've got my depth set to a 1/2 inch so that it sticks up a little bit proud when it's actually inside the mortise for it. Okay, so I thought I would try and do it with a face grain, but obviously it's going to cut out, so I'll have to make it just like I would a normal tenon. And it's a little bit tight still. I'll cut that off on the bandsaw and I'll have my plug. Flip that over and get a little bit bigger bit. And I have just the point going through, which is perfect. That way I can line up the new bit with that hole. That should be plenty deep to bury the head. So I'll mark with a marking knife around the head, and that's exactly how it'll fit into the hole, and it'll be held into place. So I'm going to measure this distance in from each edge and put the miter slot runner on the back of my board. Okay, I have my runner clamped in from the edge to about where the miter slot is. I'm going to just put 3 screws across, countersink the heads. Okay, Okay, so now all that remains is to put my the slit in here where the blade is always going to come in place. So I'm going to use a sacrificial board here to make sure I don't actually cut into my fence. So you can see that the knobs allow me to go through this whole range of angles beyond 45 degrees and also backwards to slightly under a 90 degrees. So I'll use a T-nut knob to hold my stop block in place. Just cut it off at the height of my fence. When I went to put the initial plan for the stop block on the jig, I discovered that the knob was going to get in the way of the blade on the 45-degree angle, or very nearly so. So just to give myself a little bit extra room, I put in a long foot off to the right side of the stop block holder, your left. I don't care if my blade cuts into it, but the way I have it currently set up, the stop block can pass it. So I know it fits on here just fine, even at the 45-degree angle or when it's square. I hope you found this jig video to be helpful, and if you find it useful for yourself, like the video. It'll help other people find it. If you want to see more of this, please subscribe. Thanks.